Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really provocative article by Dr. Peter C. Gaethje called CDC and FDA, Deception on Vaccine Harms. Now, it's worth noting that it draws heavily on some of the legal challenges that were laid out in a book by attorney Aaron Siri. So, the author really builds his entire case around 5 core arguments. We're going to walk through each one, starting with a point that really questions the very foundation of public trust. Okay, so first up, a question of faith. The article kicks things off by framing the public's whole relationship with vaccines not as a scientific thing, but more like a matter of belief. And this quote right here, it really sets the stage for the article's main theme. The author uses it to introduce this idea of a religion of vaccines, basically arguing that for a lot of people, belief has kind of taken the place of independently verifiable data. The source then goes on to point to legal depositions, like the one with vaccinologist Stanley Plotkin, as these moments where this so-called dogma was actually challenged under oath, really digging into the basis for these long-held safety claims. All right, next up is the immunity shield. So building on this idea of an unquestioned belief, the author points to this really critical piece of legislation from back in 1986 that he argues totally changed the game, both legally and financially for vaccine makers. This is the one, the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act. It was passed at a time when a whole bunch of lawsuits were threatening to cause vaccine shortages. But this act is absolutely central to the author's argument. He's saying that by shielding manufacturers from most liability, it took away their main financial reason to make vaccines as absolutely safe as possible. And to drive home his point about a lack of oversight, the author shows us this timeline. The article basically states that for 3 full decades, a legally required safety report, something that was supposed to keep Congress in the loop, was allegedly never filed, not once. At least, not until a lawsuit finally brought the whole thing to light. Okay, third point, placebos and missing proof. So the source now shifts gears a bit, moving away from the legal stuff and looking at the clinical trials themselves. And here he starts questioning the very methods that are used to say that vaccines are safe for the public.
So here's the claim, and it's a big one. The article alleges that almost none of the childhood vaccines on the CDC's regular schedule were licensed using the real gold standard for safety testing. A true inert placebo-controlled trial. That means testing a vaccine against something totally harmless, like a simple saline injection. Instead, he argues, new vaccines were usually just tested against older vaccines.
And this quote, this analogy, is really the crucial point here, according to the source. The idea is, if a new vaccine causes about the same number of bad reactions as an old one, then they're both considered safe. But the author says, wait a second, that whole method could be masking the true safety profile of both products. Which leads us straight to the author's next, and pretty serious accusation. This one's more recent, and it's about critical safety data from the COVID-19 vaccines being actively kept from the public.
So you might remember the CDC launched this smartphone tool called vSafe. It was designed to collect real-time data on vaccine side effects. The author points out that while, dozens of studies were published using this data, they allegedly only used information from the first week after vaccination. That means any longer-term impacts that people might have reported were just left out.
Well, according to the article, it took over 2 years of fighting in court to finally force the CDC to release the complete data set. And the author claims that when it finally came out, it revealed some pretty startling numbers about the health impacts that users were reporting. So here's the first key number from that data release, 8%. That means 8% of the 10 million vSafe users reported that they needed some kind of medical care after their vaccination. But then there's this number, which is even more striking. A full 25%. That's 1 in every 4 people. They reported missing school or work, or just being unable to do their normal everyday activities after their shot. All right, this brings us to the final pillar of the article's whole argument. It's a story about a very specific study, one the CDC was asked to do but allegedly never did, that compared the overall health of vaccinated versus unvaccinated kids. The source claims that researchers over at Henry Ford Health actually took on this study themselves. He says it was finished in early 2020, but it was never submitted for publication. Why? Because according to the author, the institution's leadership just did not want those results to get out. And these were the alleged findings from that unpublished manuscript. As you can see here, it reportedly found way higher rates of several chronic conditions in the vaccinated group.
For instance, the risk of asthma was supposedly 4 times higher, and the risk for autoimmune and neurodevelopmental disorders 5 to 6 times higher.
The author presents this as a really clear case of institutional pressure just squashing inconvenient scientific findings. He claims the researchers themselves believed in their work, they stood by it, but were just prevented from ever making it public. So let's just recap for a second. The article's argument is that this combination of legal immunity, flawed trials, hidden data, and suppressed research has created a system where the official claims about vaccine safety just can't be independently checked out by the public.
So, what we've done here is just lay out the central arguments from Dr. Goetsche's article. We're not here to confirm or deny them, just to present them as they were written. And it all leaves us with this final, really provocative question about the whole nature of scientific authority and public trust itself.